Hey, do you want to hear something interesting? The top terrorist groups in the world fear one person. His name is Pedro. But what's more surprising is that this killer is an old man around 60 years old. However, if he had continued doing it, he would have become a legend. But now he's being hunted by thousands of assassins. And they also took away all his life savings. Isn't that miserable? A legend who dedicated his life to the organization is now in danger of losing his life and asks that guy if he doesn't think the same, referring to him as Pedro, and also tells him that no matter how much he thinks about it, this doesn't make sense. Thousands of eyes are searching for him just to finish him off. How can someone like that still be alive? Or have they ever found him? Because it doesn't matter if he is Pedro or not, something like that is impossible to happen. Do you want me to tell you the answer? Even if thousands or tens of thousands of eyes are looking for me, they will never find me. Why? Because unfortunately, the Pedro they're looking for now is that man. He can't believe what his eyes are seeing and gets even more agitated upon discovering what Pedro had been hiding. To get to this point, everything happened 3 months ago, specifically inside a bookstore. An old man had just received a call telling him that he couldn't keep ignoring the calls and that if he didn't come to a hospital appointment, his life would end in less than 3 months. I am not afraid of death. I've dealt with life or death situations my whole life. I've given 50 years of my life to the organization, and I regret nothing in my life since I've lived a life without regrets. But now that I think about it, I've never made a self-portrait. Suddenly, someone enters that bookstore. It's a beautiful girl who cheerfully greets the old man since she came to buy some textbooks, and this old man turns around to welcome her, telling her they sell all the books they have here, except for the ones they don't have. The girl asks if by any chance he has used textbooks, and Pedro replies that yes, all of them from the 60 seconds onwards. The girl asks for the latest ones from this year, since they are for her little brother, and Pedro asks if she is a student at the school next door. And judging by her tag, he could assure she is in her last year, to which the girl responds that he is correct and how he knows so much. Pedro says it's because he knows everything about this neighborhood, and the girl is surprised to see that the books Pedro prepared for her are actually not used, but completely new. So the girl replies that she doesn't have enough money to pay for all that. But Pedro tells her that he doesn't need them anymore, so he'll just give them to her as a gift. The girl insists that she couldn't accept that, so Pedro tears the bag and with a warm smile tells her that now they are used and that the reason he does it. It's because seeing the look in the girl's eyes, he knows very well that she adores her little brother, telling him to be good to him while he can. Sorry. If you don't, you'll regret it. The girl starts referring to Pedro as a grandpa, but Pedro prefers to be called sir. The girl asks him if he's ever regretted anything, and Pedro tells her that the more one lives, the more one regrets. But despite that, there's nothing more we can do. Remembering a little girl crying. It's the only way for both you and your daughter to live. You can never do anything about past mistakes you regret. And with a blank look, he tells her that she probably doesn't know what he means, asking her to always take care of her little brother, and not to do something she might regret later, so turn around and leave. I won't kill you if you do. The girl wonders how he could know while turned away. Pedro tells her that he has memorized the faces of every single student in this school, but he still had to confirm something, and what gave her away was that the school was founded only 2 years ago, so she couldn't be in her last year. Besides that, he has spent his whole life smelling blood, so a simple, badly made perfume like that couldn't hide the scent of a knife, causing the girl to rush to attack him directly, but on her own. She stops, as even though she's the one with the weapon, she feels that if she attacks, it will be her who ends up dying. Pedro hands her the books since despite everything, he knows that at least the things he said about her little brother are real. Jackie has been doing this for 50 years. So she has good judgment just by looking into someone's eyes. Pedro asks her if she's from the same orphanage he comes from since the scripts there never change, and they are quite predictable. If her mission fails, they would still have plan B, pushing that girl, who didn't know what Pedro meant, but then she understood everything. Some assassins fell from the roof and began shooting indiscriminately. Pedro tells her that when a mission fails, then the person in charge must also be eliminated. The girl realizes that Pedro had been injured in the abdomen, but this didn't matter to her, and she kept running from those guys. Quickly, Pedro grabs a weapon, but those guys had already taken the girl hostage, hitting her square in the face, and reproaching himself that his body can't move according to his will. One of the guys wonders if it's really Pedro. Someone like him, and another one comes to tell him he's sorry, but it seems the legendary Pedro is nothing when it comes to diseases. He's known as the 8-legged man. Pedro tells him to cut the nonsense and tell him the reason why, that they are trying to kill him. The 8-legged man tells him it's because the boss doesn't like it, since if he leaves this world, thousands of pursuers will come after him because the bounty on his head is 7.6 billion won. Pedro laughs, saying it's funny because that's exactly what he has in the bank, which he spent his whole life saving up, The eight-legged man tells him that now that money will be in someone else's hands. He starts laughing at how unfortunate Pedro is at that very moment, giving him a full blow and sending him crashing to the other side of the room. The guys mentioned they were a bit excited but didn't expect things to be this easy. But at that moment, Pedro leaves them a little gift, a stun grenade. It explodes in that little library, allowing him to escape the place immediately. They rush out to find him before he gets too far, while the girl watches all of this unfold before her eyes. Not far from there, in a children's park, Pedro was suffering. Asterisk, I couldn't even defend myself properly, asterisk, he thought, and with his body completely wrecked, he realized he had gotten too old. His life was the organization itself. While others held a pencil in their hand, he bled 365 days a year to learn how to hold a knife. While others learned to use social media online, he learned to spy and listen until his ears bled. While others went on dates and learned to love, he had become a Russian spy living in constant freeze, 24/7, and when others started families and lived normal lives, he fought among a terrorist group to survive. He had worked with his life on the line for years. But the situation changed when the new boss took over. He was going to name Pedro the new boss because of the reputation he had built, but it didn't happen since Pedro was sick. And on top of that, he was too soft, so he decided to get rid of him. Pedro left everything behind. He didn't desire wealth or honor, wondering if his life had always been this pathetic and that they shouldn't do this to him after all he had worked for. He couldn't die like this. No, he couldn't let them take his money because that money is for someone special. But his body was already in bad shape, so his time had run out in that very spot. Meanwhile, at the hideout of the eight-legged man, those guys were upset about having let Pedro escape, and more than that, over the 7.6 billion, wondering why they would offer so much money for a simple old man at his end, and probably out of respect for a legend of such caliber. One of them had resigned his kickboxing champion title, showing them a photo of Pedro, saying he would take care of the old man himself and become as successful as him. Asterisk. You know, that's the first photo I'm in. Or should I say, asterisk. Asterisk, the first picture I've ever been in. Asterisk. Those guys thought it was Pedro for wearing the same clothes as him, but this kid tells them he doesn't know either. But when he woke up, one of them tells him he's in the wrong place and that a student like him shouldn't be here. I came here because I know everything. Stop wasting my time and take me to the eight-legged man. The subjects just look at each other thinking he is one of them, but unfortunately for him, if someone from his same profession shows up like this, they'll have to kill him. The protagonist stops that punch like it's nothing, making that subject instantly notice his strength, and Pedro remembers when he was hit and mocked. Yes, that's right. Those who master the use of utensils are third class. Those who master all weapons are second class. But first class, who use anything and everything as a weapon. That subject lunges at Pedro with everything, but he disarms him with a whip-like strike from his tentacle and finishes him, dragging him with the same tentacles of the octopus, smashing him against that bucket. They ask him who the hell he is and why he's doing this, but the protagonist raises that photo, remembering the bounty on his head. This is the only photo they have of my face. I'm Pedro, a man who was once called the best in the field. I turn into the younger version of myself when I open my eyes. Even if thousands of people die thousands of times and wake up, the old Pedro they're looking for is already dead. It's the rejuvenated Pedro. And on the other side, in a car, we see the eight-legged man talking to that girl, who we see is now injured and has a bandage. The eight-legged man mentions that Pedro had cancer, so his lifespan was almost over. In the meantime, Pedro observes that the eight-legged man's hideout is a restaurant, and at the bus station, guys can't stop looking at Pedro, who's totally ripped. He wonders if what is happening makes any sense, and I wonder the same, mentioning that the gunshot wound has disappeared along with the cancer pain that had caused him so much trouble. Now he had no doubts. He had become a younger version, so he would take advantage of this, so he wouldn't be recognized with his current appearance, since that old man they keep searching for is nowhere to be found. So now Pedro is getting ready to find a change of clothes, and he manages to overhear some thugs talking about a girl who asked them for money since her mother is sick. But what caught his attention the most were their outfits. They carried themselves with such pride, but he stared at them so long that one of them notices him. So he speaks directly to the protagonist, who tells them this is a no-smoking area, asking them to go outside. The thugs tell him that if he doesn't use honorifics with them, he'll end up getting beaten, and one of them slaps him, telling him to leave since he's in a good mood right now, but if he keeps messing with people like this, he'll end up dying soon. So the protagonist walks away saying he won't waste his time with these kinds of people, while the bullies mock him. But what he was really plotting was to lock himself in with those two to avoid wasting more time. The bullies are not intimidated. On the contrary, they mock him. So the protagonist, with a killer look, tells them he'll show them what happens when they don't respect their elders in this country. One of them thinks about attacking him, but for him, it's already too late. The proto was too fast and ends up beating him up. With no time to react to the bully upon seeing this, the other guy asks who the hell he is, to which Pedro tells him he doesn't know him, but at least he recognizes that knife he's holding, and tells him he's holding it wrong, saying he'll end up cutting himself if he shakes it the wrong way, making Pedro angry. With a threatening look, he provokes him, so the bully charges at him, but the bro dodges him and in the process throws that weapon and in just a few seconds counters the attack. Here the bully could only complain about the pain he had suffered in just a few moments. He asks who the hell is he, but Pedro tells him he can't tell him because if he ends up knowing who he is, unfortunately, he would have to die right here, and asks him to take off his pants, and that starting today he will live doing legal things so he won't cause them any more problems. And upon checking his bank account, he notices he no longer has the 7.6 billion won, and with a new outfit says that despite telling them not to touch his money, they ended up doing it, so now they will have to suffer the consequences. And behind him, a girl was talking about how she finally got a scholarship at the Glory Club. Pedro remembers that's the name of the orphanage where he grew up as a child, and after 50 years it had turned into a gigantic cartel that spreads its influence to every corner of the world. While inside, they force thousands of children and young people to do illegal things, swearing that he himself will bring it down with his own hands. On the other side, we see a butcher talking to the eight-legged man who tells the butcher that he will die soon if he keeps trusting Pedro. But the eight-legged man, with a laugh, says he wants to end this quickly, and the other guy sends 4 of his men to take care of the eight-legged man group, Wang, the best private military company in the West. That man is somewhat confused that despite being surrounded, the eight-legged man still maintains his confidence, so he orders them once and for all to finish him off. But to his surprise, that man is left terrified after what his eyes had witnessed. Scared, he tells the eight-legged man that he is not human, and they show us the eight-legged man with his body completely bent to his will. Man code, eight-legged, man rank B, with the feature of hypermobility throughout his body. National rank number 1 of Jujutsu G, completely terrified by what he had just seen. He tells him to step back, but the eight-legged man ends up finishing him off in his own restaurant. The eight-legged man had just arrived to find his henchman on the floor with no evidence of who had done it, and the one responsible for all this, but he knows without a doubt that the only person who could have done this is Pedro, and he gets excited since soon the reward for Pedro will finally be issued and he wants it all for himself. The girl starts to remember what that old man did for her, but now she works for the eight-legged man. But to her surprise, someone was still in the restaurant. Our protagonist was waiting for him patiently. A waiter asks if he has a reservation with them, but the bro tells them no, he has no reservation, but what he does have is some resentment towards them. The eight-legged man asks if they have ever met or if he has done something to annoy him, and the prota tells him the resentment is about the bill but not the restaurants. It's for something much bigger, about 7.6 billion won. And almost instantly, the eight-legged man orders to close all the doors. He asks if he is somehow related to Pedro, but unfortunately for him, that doesn't matter because he won't leave this place alive, and he thinks carefully about how someone like him knows about the reward for Pedro. If it hasn't even been issued yet, that waiter prepares his weapon while the eight-legged man and Pedro stare at each other. The eight-legged man, after thinking it over, offers him 2 options. The first is to tell him Pedro's whereabouts and he will let him live. Or the second is if he resists, he will die with a single shot. But the prota, mocking him, tells him he doesn't need either option and prepares to enjoy the octopus, and with a smile, reveals to him that he is actually Pedro, and it was he who killed his subordinates. The eight-legged man with a terrifying look asks him what the hell he is talking about, and the prota confidently repeats it, so the eight-legged man starts to doubt the truth of his words. But still, he thinks that this is totally impossible, so he asks again about his relationship with Pedro. Our prota just stares at that girl who without hesitation got into a defensive stance with a weapon and tells the eight-legged man that if he wants to know his relationship with him, there's only one way, and that is to kill him. To which the eight-legged man says that is what he does best, ordering them to shoot him and just make sure he can breathe. But at that moment, Pedro strikes him with the chopsticks in his vital points. That girl thinks that makes no sense, since for someone his age there isn't anyone in Club Gloria who can do that. The eight-legged man flatters him, saying that even if that was luck, it caught his attention. So he asks to join them, but it was just a facade as he instantly shoots him with his weapon. Pedro manages to take cover with the table, but the eight-legged man just laughs, since despite that, he managed to get through that table, and as he got closer to finish him off, he noticed what was spilled. It was chili oil and not blood, desperately searching everywhere. But Pedro was right above him and spits all the chili oil in his face, taking that opportunity to disarm him, and why not throw some solid punches. The eight-legged man wonders if he is really someone so young, since he couldn't do anything against the boy in front of him. As he twists his little head, the eight-legged man still conscious, asks what sense this makes since all his life he had faced countless opponents, but today is the first time he meets someone so skilled despite his age and begins to remember the moments he spent developing his special technique, one that only he could use. But the most important thing is not to turn your back on your opponent when you think you've already won. And from that moment, he felt he would never lose to anyone grabbing Pedro's ankle. And with all his strength, he clings to it, twisting half of the protagonist's body, telling him that he has been doing this all his life, and the amount of experience that separates them is vast against a mere novice like him. And with that confidence, he asks if he understands now, but in reality, the one he was holding was not the protagonist, but his subordinate, since with all that oil in his eyes, he could see clearly. And now, all the experience he had acquired over decades told him he was going to be killed by that man he had just met. So his only option is to ask him to talk things over, and he quickly grabs the girl with the patch, offering her in exchange for letting him go. And despite this, the girl felt fear of being abandoned, begging him not to do it. The protagonist tells her to accept the deal, and as expected from a member of the Glory Club, he thinks pretty fast. The flat cap man leaves, telling him to use her as he wishes, and that he will overlook everything that happened today. Special technique: if you show your back when you think you've won, your head will fly. At that moment, the eight-legged man remembers what his instructor told him. You will always encounter strong opponents, so you need to subdue them when they get distracted. And at that very moment, the flat cap man remembers that his instructor was Pedro, and now he has no doubts. They are really the same person. His last words were, "There is no one who knows Pedro and is still alive after that event and elsewhere." There was no doubt. The death of the eight-legged man had been confirmed. How amusing. He killed 4 well-trained assassins without leaving a single trace. A reward of 7.6 billion, a triple S level mission. Tell all the assassins of glory that from this moment on, hunting Pedro is permitted. And in the city, a girl pointed upward. Everyone turned at that moment, and our protagonist was also there to witness it. The announcement they had put up about him: please give the elderly a hot meal by putting a number where those who wanted to could donate, just like you. For those who want to support me, you already know you can join the channel members. Those who join will be thanked in the next part of this video. And of course, it's not mandatory, but if you want to support me in some way, subscribe and like this video. That also supports me a lot. And now let's continue with the story. And you don't need to look for me, since I'll go directly to find you. The protagonist thinks about what he will need: reinforcements to take down the Glory Club, and thinks of a woman who is quite strange. And at night, he heads to a demolished restroom, where he wonders why the number of people in these kinds of places always increases. And passing by some people, he finally finds a hidden door. Upon entering, he is amazed by how luxurious and incredible that room looks. But not much time passes before someone points a gun at his neck, to which the protagonist tells her that even with all this, it's of no use to her, and the reason is that she is blind. That woman mentions that after a long time, it seems she will have to get rid of another corpse, and by smelling it, she knows that person is quite young. But they don't smell like alcohol at all, nor are they one of the homeless people who pass by here. What catches her attention the most is that she can sense murderous intentions coming from him, and without hesitation, she attacks him, thinking he has been sent by Glory. Pedro dodges each of that woman's attacks and asks the protagonist if he has ever seen a blind woman like her. So Pedro grabs her by the body and pins her to the floor. The woman flatters him since she didn't think Glory would have a guy like him. But what intrigues her the most is that he has no intention of killing her, taking advantage of this to distract him with those words, to command her dog to attack the protagonist. But the woman's surprise is another, since that furious dog, instead of attacking him, gets ready to play with the protagonist, and after some drinks and clearing things up, the woman couldn't believe that Pedro had rejuvenated by touching his face all over, wondering how this is possible. And she throws herself on the floor to see if she can also rejuvenate like Pedro, since now that she has met someone like this, she also wants to try dying to be able to do that rejuvenation thing. And after Pedro gave her a bump on the head, the woman, calmer, asks how he plans to face Glory alone. Pedro tells her that thanks to the fact that they are now looking for him, it's his opportunity to become a Glory killer again and be able to end all this from the root. The woman tells him what nonsense. What you're saying, but thinking it through, it would be like planning Pedro's capture in the palm of Pedro's own hands. The woman tells him that he's really scary, but Pedro mentions that she's the one who's scarier and says that's impossible. Since to be a killer of Glory, one must first graduate from the orphanage itself, and even though the Pedro of the past did meet that requirement, the Pedro of now is simply an outsider. But with a smile, Pedro tells him there's a way, and at the Institute of Glory, we see some girls putting on makeup to catch our protagonist's attention. Haha, he's going to pose as a student. This prota is one of the gods, and they whisper that this student is a foreigner named Kim Song-gu. Embarrassed, they tell the prota they need to go to the auditorium. the school founded by the Glory Foundation. New Glory Secondary School looks like a normal school from the outside, but the true purpose of its existence is to foster killers, a secret intensive class of assassins, and that's the only way to become a killer of the Glory Club. I will enter the intensive class of assassins. Already in the auditorium, the Proto communicates with that blind woman and asks her if there's any way to get in. The Proto mentions that there is a way, and it happens rarely. But at the same time, it catches their attention, and both the girl and the dog are surprised by what the Proto is about to do. He stands in front of all the students and without any shame tells them he's a killer, because only in that way will the elite killers recognize him. Everyone at the school is astonished by the Proto's words, and Pedro tells them that starting today, a thug will be in their care. A thug pushes a girl who was recording, and in just a few seconds, the Proto was surrounded by several killers. The biggest one asks if he's flirting with Yejin, but the Proto doesn't know what he means, and suddenly tears fall from his eyes. Calling him an idiot, Jean Giselle had only focused his eyes on one woman for a long time. Yejin, Giselle's girlfriend, whom he has been dating for 22 days. The best couple at the New Glory Institute, and for him, today, his girlfriend had been stolen by Pedro. So without hesitation, he throws a punch at the Proto. Haha. And I forgot to mention, but Yang controlled the entire Mapo district with just his fists. But for the first time, he felt death, and in his last moments, he regretted not being able to protect his girlfriend. But the Proto stopped his fist just millimeters before hitting him and instead flicked him on the forehead, completely falling defeated before the protagonist. A teacher quickly arrived to tell them not to fight, since this is a sacred school, and scolds the protagonist and his parents for raising him that way, so he takes him away while a mysterious person asks another guy what they should do and if they should find out more about that new student. But the other guy tells him it's better to kill him. Meanwhile, the protagonist is taken by the teacher to another place, and we see the girl who worked for the eight-legged man wondering what the hell Pedro is doing here. But the other guy tells him it's better to kill him while the protagonist is taken away by the teacher to another place. And we see the girl who worked for the eight-legged man wondering what the hell Pedro is doing here, and instantly thinks that he probably wants to get rid of this school, and later the protagonist sits next to her. By the way, her name is Yoonvil. It's a bit strange, but well, it's a Korean name. Yoonvi asks why he is here, but more importantly, the protagonist asks them how the hell she is going to eat all that. Yoonbi remembers the last time she saw the protagonist, he asked her if she wanted to live, but the condition for leaving her alive was to tell the Glory people that old Pedro had gotten rid of the eight-legged man along with his subordinates, so she asked the protagonist why he came to find her if she kept her promise, but the protagonist tells her he didn't come here for her, and she tells him that because of him, everyone in the company is watching her and it's a total hassle. Pedro tells her she only survived because he saved her, but she retorts that she lived on her own. So Pedro tells her she has no idea what kind of place this is, and that she doesn't even know who he really is. Yoonbi tells him if he thinks he can do anything against them, so the protagonist proposes that she help him, since they are in the same boat, and while leaving he tells her he's counting on her, calling her Diuna. The girl turns and asks how he knows her real name, but Pedro had already disappeared from that place. Meanwhile, there was an athletics competition for the new beginning. My name is Jonathan, the man nicknamed Usain Bolt from the New Glory High School. However, it seems that today will be the day of my retirement because of that new transfer student, that bastard. While the girls cheered for Pedro, someone was watching him from afar, and Usain Bolt was being consoled by Yang. Everyone was impressed by what Pedro was doing, and in the cooking tests, all the girls wanted to be Pedro's teachers, and he ended up sculpting a perfect rabbit out of pure apples. Hey, so what do you plan to do? A bully tells his teacher that he doesn't want to clean, while one of them records it since they plan to frame him by putting words in his mouth that he didn't say. Here, the teacher doesn't let them intimidate him, so the bully gets tired and throws him to the ground, threatening to sue him and revoke his teaching license. Everyone laughs at him, but the protagonist arrives to take out the trash and asks them if they hit the teacher. So they stand in front of the protagonist and want to teach him a lesson. The protagonist just asks them to step aside, but they ignore him and spit on Pedro. So now, Pedro was somewhat annoyed, but he still held back. So the other guy attacks him, and Pedro just dodges all the bully's attacks. Another one attacks him with a brick, but Pedro smacks it away like it's nothing. So after showing them the difference in strength, he makes them apologize to the teacher, and they shout that justice will always win. But Pedro tells them that's why he won the Prota, asks the teacher if he's okay, but he was shaking from what the Prota had done. The Prota picks up the phone they left behind, and the teacher yells at him that he still fought in front of him, and the Prota instantly plays the recording they made of the teacher. That professor kicks the Prota and smiles, knowing that the Prota isn't an ordinary person, and the proof is that he didn't spill a single drop when he fought the students, asking him where he learned to fight, or rather why he learned something like that. And with a look full of hatred, he replies that he wants to take revenge on people like him, on the whole Glory Club that stole his life, his house, his family, his money. He lost everything he had worked so hard for. He is practically dead inside. Here the teacher asks if he is interested in joining the volunteer club, and with a smile, the Prota tells him that he has been waiting for his arrival all this time. He was the one who had been following the Prota, calling him the assassin instructor of the Glory Club, and they reveal that the assassin training class is called the Volunteer Club, and only a few, selected, learn to live like an assassin. The teacher tells him that for a transfer student, it's quite rare, but still, it won't be easy, welcoming him to the place where the assassins of glory are trained at the Volunteer Club. And as he opens that door, Pedro wonders if this is really the Volunteer Club. Is this really the place where they train assassins? The teacher asks them to pay attention, and again, Yumi wonders what the hell the Prota is doing there. But more importantly, why can't he stop looking at her, winking shamelessly in front of the others? Man, he doesn't know if what he did was wink, if something got in his eye, or if he was just trying to say he would kill her, and he introduces himself to everyone. But inside, he thinks it's a place with a pretty ordinary appearance, but two of the attendees tell him that this is not a warm welcome and that they don't care at all about his name. The Prota thinks at least these two do look fit, and one of them mentions that only those from the orphanage are allowed in here. Otherwise, what would be the point? The other big guy thinks the same and asks why he is here. The teacher suggests having a simple welcome party, and the others think it would be good to make punch, but with pure blood punches while they prepare to take out their weapons. But the other two tell them to stay out. They are the ones who will teach him a lesson. Ianbi tells them to stop, because if they don't, they'll be dead. But the big guy tells him to just get out of his way, if he doesn't want to end up beaten next to the protagonist, and they ask the protagonist if he knows how to fight. Pedro replies that he does and that he has some experience, and they both tell him that this will be his last fight. Pedro blocks both of them with just his hands, and one of them tells him that this isn't a place for people like him, since he has no idea why they risk their lives. The other grabs him by the leg and says the reason is to become the best assassin in the world, just like him. But he wonders who they're talking about, and they were referring to the disciple Pietro, saying there's no place for a baby like him, and they end up separating. Pedro says he's tired of this and gets into a fighting stance, saying he's had enough. He listens to them divide their dialogue, challenging them to come at him both at once, which annoys them. They tell him he has no idea how much weight his 18 years of life carry. Pedro stares at them, since he has lived for 65 years, and in the end, the Dago brothers are praised by their peers, saying the new guy couldn't do anything, and he ends up leaving. Iyomi goes after the protagonist and asks if he's underestimating the volunteer club and that at least he can't fool her since she was watching him before and at no point did he put any power in his punch. The protagonist tells her he always goes all out, but Yumbi says he's lying and that she is proof, since, unlike them, he isn't even sweating, cornering him against the wall, asking what the reason is and that even though he may be suspicious for being at school, what does he gain by hiding his true strength? What is he plotting? The protagonist asks if she really wants to know, and Ambi responds that she does. The protagonist uses the excuse that it's lunchtime, and Iambi says it's already midnight. At a bus station, a man is happy because he has been paid $1,000,001 just for renting a bus. But his surprise is something else. When he sees that there is only one person, he asks about the others, but that guy tells him it will only be him since, as you can see, he has too much stuff. The driver kindly tries to help him with the luggage, but that man takes his hands off his suitcase and challenges him to guess what's in it. Scared, he drives with fear because of that man, who was calmly watching him since he noticed something moving inside one of his suitcases. Then in class, the teacher assigns a new quest to them, and this is a mission from the group President Deja, as he is one of the major sponsors of Glory, and the team that succeeds will receive a volunteer certificate with the president's recommendation. In other words, this will officially make him an assassin. The teacher tells them that there have recently been kidnappings of teenagers, and the problem. One of those guys is the only son of the president. A student asks why. They don't just call the police, and the answer is simple. President Choi wants revenge. All he has to do is save his son by asking those who want to participate to raise their hand. But many of them start to doubt since something so big would normally be assigned to bigger killers, and it's rare for them to be assigned this, but the brothers say they will obviously handle this matter and laugh since they won't be the only ones. The Prota and Umbi also accepted this mission, although Enbi is a bit annoyed because the Prota raised his hand at the same time, and so both are ready, but the teacher tells them they have to do something first. I had my chance after entering this school, but why the hell are they recovering a kidnapped person in an amusement park? And in the amusement park, Pedro and his companions watch a parade of beautiful girls, and the brothers wonder why those girls are wearing bikinis in the park, but it's because they've never been to places like this. The Prota and Ambi look at them like perverts, and she starts to think why the director's son would be in a place like this. while Pedro is asked to record a TikTok and he doesn't even know what that is, showing us a flashback of the teacher, showing the location where they have the director's son, and their mission is obviously to rescue him, but they also have to defeat the kidnapper, and the last they knew of him is that he was seen in a place called Blue World, but Yubi is a bit confused because she doesn't know where that is, so she watches the Prota, wondering if he is capable of solving a case like this, since Umbi sees Pedro as someone who could do it all, and he tells her to follow him. Upon arriving at the attraction, one of the employees tells them that only those who made a reservation can enter, and kindly asks them to leave. The brothers get annoyed with that employee, but Enby understands them since they've never been to a park, and neither has she. Enby uses her phone to reserve some rides, and to ensure they don't get left out. And the brothers complain to her since it seems like she only came here to have fun. But it seems like they are the ones enjoying being here playing most of the kids' games. Haha, seeing them like this, Pedro and Ambi decide to participate in a shooting game, and the person in charge mocks them by giving them a free trial, since he knows that underneath the objects there is a weight that will prevent them from knocking them down. And Ambi mentions she has never seen a fake gun like this. And after that, they leave thanking the attendant for all the prizes they won. He is left with a what the fuck face. Pedro notices that everyone is very lively and also excited to be here, since it's very likely they also spent their childhood the same way he did. So from afar, he wishes they keep having fun, because who knows when they'll smile like that again. Iambi separates from them since he wanted to grab some food on his own, but suddenly, he gets a signal from his AirPods, from the director's son wondering why he received such a signal on his phone, and starts to believe that he might actually be here. But why the signal is coming from the women's bathroom at that moment? Yubi is filled with doubts, but in the end, he decides to act on his own, and upon entering, he sees another girl fixing herself in the mirror wondering why the signal is coming from that girl, so he better ask her directly about her iPods. And with a beautiful, non-suspicious smile, he asks her where she got them, alerting her boyfriend, and she tells him that Umbi tried to attack her from behind. The big guy approaches her saying that she's a thief. Yumbi tries to explain that it's a misunderstanding, and the big guy starts slapping Yumbi while the other girl shamelessly laughs, and he thinks about hitting her for a while longer until he's satisfied. While the protagonist and the others wonder where the hell that girl went, but they're somewhat unconcerned since Pedro knows that Ambi isn't as weak as she seems, and we see how she lunges at that big guy, grabbing him by the shoulder and then unleashing a flurry of attacks all over his body. And not just that. She also wants to hit him with the paddle in the little hole, but stops in the end because she thinks that would be going too far, asking him what he knows about those iPods, and now she's not going to be nice to her anymore, so she'll have to watch her words. Pedro observes his phone while receiving the looks from everyone for how charming he is, and Ambi arrives with them saying she found the AirPods of the director's son and the place where they were found. Pedro mentions that it seems to be the same place he thought, telling them to just think about it. This is a place with a lot of people watching you, and the only place where someone could be kidnapped is one where almost nobody is looking, and also where it wouldn't be strange at all to shout or be attacked by someone, showing them that the haunted house is always reserving spots all day. Pointing at that place at the same time, the brothers want to take all the credit, so they're the first to enter. But Pedro and Ambi were already ahead, and one of the brothers doesn't stop grabbing Embi. Pedro stops for a moment saying there's something strange about all this, and it's that since he entered, he hasn't seen anyone, asking them to get ready since their mission has just begun, because he knows that from the start their mission was to be kidnapped, everyone falling to the floor from the gas that was spreading in that place and at the school. The teacher desperately asks the instructor to contact the kids, but they don't answer the calls. And seriously, he mentions the name Park Sando, saying that this wasn't such a simple mission, since that man was considered a candidate for apostle, and the only reason he wasn't was that glory couldn't contain him, so he was expelled. The instructor tells him not to worry too much since they have learned quite a bit in his course, but trembling in fear, he says no, with a face of complete concern, saying that guy, the instructor asks if that's what he thinks. But we go back to Ianbi and Pedro, who were tied up in what seems to be the basement, and the guy with glasses confesses to them that he used chloroform to put them to sleep, a painkiller commonly used in movies. But he knows that when a person faints, they leave their mouth open. So why does Ianbi have hers closed? The professor mentions that somehow they have to stop them since Park Sang-do is a very cruel person, and he's the one who took a leg from the distressed instructor, who now wants to save the kids. Ianbi opens her eyes and thinks it seems she has been discovered because if they fall into his hands, he won't hesitate to cut off their legs, lunging towards Ianbi. But just before that, he stops, because his cell phone starts ringing, so he picks it up and answers himself. The professor recognizes his voice and threatens to kill him if he does anything to any of his students. Sang-do greets him since it's been a while since he last heard from him and asks if he wants him to leave. They're them legless, just like him, betting that by the time he gets to that place, how many legs they would have left. telling him that if he manages to guess it, he'll spare the president's son and give him whatever he wants. But the professor couldn't stop trembling at the words he had just heard and tells him he should hurry up because he will also start right away. Eonb wonders if the protag was really asleep since it seems he does have his mouth open. And wow, just look at those pretty feet. She wanted to wake him up forcefully, but the protag tells her what the hell is she doing since he was never asleep in the first place, and he asks her if she wanted to wake him up with the smell of her feet. Haha. And he taught the protag how to get out of situations like that. But Pedro had already freed himself a long time ago since he was planning to act at any moment from the beginning, if necessary. Pedro starts calling her by her real name, calling her Ayuna, and asks if she likes to gamble. Meanwhile, the brothers mock that guy since he looks like a businessman and directly ask him where he has the president's son. Again, he asks them to bet, and the brothers accept the wager, while we see the professor heading at full speed to the place, thinking that they should never accept his bets since if they lose, he will cut off both of their legs. The brothers stare at him intently, and out of nowhere, they strip down, telling him they'll leave him in a wheelchair, but he drops a knife, and tells them that bets are only fun when they're fair. One of them charges at him with everything, saying he's going to regret it since knives are his specialty, and they both engage in a death match with knives. But he quickly notices something strange about that man, and it's that even though they have the same knife, these knives are dull. I thought they looked a bit off. Pedro and Ambi arrive at the confrontation, but the brothers shout for them not to come closer, that this is their fight, and if they can't win, what chance do they have? Haha. These guys both get serious and mention that they passed the last test called the Month of Hell. A test where you start without food or water. The only supplies they have is a gun with a single bullet, in addition to having to survive in a place full of hungry beasts. And during these tests, the bullets were used in various ways, whether to hunt, betray a teammate, or even for oneself. They didn't know if they would make it, but one thing they were sure of was that they didn't want their lives to end there. That's why they worked hard and always kept their bullet until the last moment, as one day it would decide their fate. And it wasn't until the end of the month that they found out that out of 181 students in the school, only they passed. But then they heard a shocking story about how Pedro the Apostle had an unprecedented record. He hadn't used a bullet in his 58 years. 10 years have passed since then, and they've dedicated themselves to following Pedro's example, to become the best, while Pedro calmly just observed. As both brothers charged at Sangdo, the bigger one tackled him and immobilized him, while the other attacked him from the air, telling him he would regret giving him that knife. But Sangdo just laughs and holds him tightly with one hand, since if he doesn't have a blade to cut with, he'll use his hands to pierce them. But the big brother takes the other knife and attacks at high speed, wanting to be like Pedro. Do they really think they can do it? Shattering the blade into pieces. That weapon is called a kukri, and he spent his whole life training with it. Faster than a sword and heavier than an axe, this is the ultimate killing weapon, Park Sang-dio. Former assassin of glory, skills in swordsmanship. Still, the brothers aren't intimidated. But if they aren't, even less so is Sangdo, who quickly cuts down the brothers in seconds, a complete monster. And before they lose consciousness, the first thing they think of is protecting Yuna and the protagonist. But immediately they fall to the ground. And smiling, he tells them there's still one bet left to fulfill. So he will start with one of their legs at a time. The teacher shouts for him not to touch them, and he will give him what's left of his other leg, though of course it's just to build tension since he's not even close and someone shouts for him to stop. And at that moment, the protagonist suggests making a bet, catching Sangdo's attention by doubling the brothers' wager. Since Pedro bet his 2 legs, 1 arm, and his own neck, Sangdo just laughs, thinking that after all, they do belong to glory, so he accepts the proposal by throwing the weapon to Pedro again. He says that betting is only fun when it's fair, and someone shouts at Pedro not to take it since it's impossible for him to win with his own weapon. But Pedro grabs a metal lid, saying that this is enough, and Sangdo just mocks him, telling him that he's quite the funny guy and charges at him, saying he won't be nice just because he's young. Pedro dodges that barrage, and thinks that probably the protagonist intends to use him as a shield, but how much of his attacks can that simple lid withstand? And the teacher mentions that Sangdu took everything from him just like that day, remembering a lady who was nervous, since Sangdu bet with her and would come out alive or dead from that place, as behind him, several chainsaw-wielding assassins had completely surrounded him, and the teacher was one of them, telling him that he had caused many problems for glory, forcing him to resign to calm the anger of his bosses. In our world, we were a team of veteran assassins with rank B or higher, and no matter how good or fast Sango is, it should be difficult for him to face 5 B-ranked people alone. But those skills I saw with the knife that day felt like they were beyond human understanding. And that same day, I also died as an assassin, since it doesn't matter if the chainsaw is powerful, or the knife. The important thing is that when he holds it, he becomes a completely different and quite dangerous person for anyone. He would have split the tray that held Pedro in half, making Yuna go on guard, ready to attack him at any moment, but with his own hands. Pedro compresses the lid and thanks Sangdo, since thanks to him he now has a pretty good weapon. Sangdo mentions that he's not an ordinary student, but inside he wonders if what he saw was just a coincidence, and he believed that his cuts had hit time and time again. But out of nowhere, in about 1/1000th of a second, the protagonist had retreated, wondering if he really is just a student, and throws him his jacket, telling him that tricks like that won't work on him. But he himself has to check one thing, covering Pedro's vision while he attacks him, and this time he is sure he managed to cut him. But out of nowhere, Pedro was no longer in front of him, blocking Pedro's view while attacking him, and this time he's sure he managed to cut him. But out of nowhere, Pedro was no longer in front of him, but right behind him, and that feeling he had of cutting him was just a pillow. For the first time, he experienced the feeling that he was going to die and asks if he is really just a simple student. And now he understood that from the very beginning, Pedro had been aiming for his neck with that weapon, plus Pedro's speed was something he couldn't keep up with. He was facing a complete monster, and one was frozen in place watching Pedro's movements, wondering why Sangdo seems so slow compared to him, and if this fight continued like this, Pedro would probably end up winning. But he also noticed that the protagonist had been hurt since Sangdo had pulled out another one of his weapons, realizing it was a new weapon that no longer tripled the weight of a regular knife. So now speed was not an advantage for Pedro, and in Yuna's eyes, everything was completely different from a few moments ago, but there was something strange about it all, and that was that Sangdo wielded the knife like it was a sword. He attacked Pedro, putting all his speed and strength into his right arm, but in the end, he let go, saying that something like this didn't make sense. Pedro told him if his hands lost their mobility, and Sangdo finally understood it. He never intended to cut his neck with that weapon since from the beginning he was aiming for his hands, asking him what he had done to the flexor muscles, extensor muscles, vocal muscles, median nerve, radial nerve, ulnar nerve. All of these are the muscles and ligaments necessary to move the hand and be able to grip it, and he had cut each one of these, doing it since the start of the fight. He never intended to kill him. Sangdo now trembled completely because to him, the person in front of him was not a student or a child, wondering how many people he had killed so far. As I said before, I won't be able to defeat that iron blade just using that cover, because from now on, I'll show you how to break a rock, and with these kitchen gloves. But before that, we see a flashback of some kids urinating on Sangdo while he was tied to a tree as they mocked him. Those memories took up most of what he lived through. Sangdo in his childhood imagined killing them every day, but he never had the courage or strength to resist until that incident happened. One of the boys who bullied him told him that if he managed to win against those furious dogs, he would never bother him again, and in that moment when he only thought about dying, it was when the words, "Hey, would you like to bet?" made his heart race so suddenly. His legs began to feel lighter. Sangdo didn't know the reason, but what he was sure of was that when he bet, his own life became much stronger. Dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline flooded his body completely every time he risked his life, as betting opened up endless possibilities for him. Because in the end, he always won them all, thinking he was the strongest even to this day, as he couldn't understand what the hell. Yuna was watching everything, somewhat anxious, while Pedro kept beating Sangdo mercilessly. Sangdo, who was more afraid than ever, pulled out a grenade, but his whole body was shaking with fear, threatening to detonate it in front of all the bags. That's where the teenagers were, but Pedro was a bit confused. Seeing him, he was told that the president's son was inside one of those bags, which was quite cruel, don't you think? Being inside a very uncomfortable bag with little oxygen, Yuna thought he was completely insane. Doing something like that, and if it all explodes, it will be the end for everyone. You can see the gas pipe passing through the ceiling. If that explodes, we'll all die together. So if you don't want to die, kneel down. For Pedro, all those words didn't affect him in the slightest, and he quickly shoved it in Sangdo's mouth, telling him that if he's ever used one, he should already know this. He pulled the pin from the grenade, telling him to bite down hard if he didn't want to die. That's what a real threat, island. And if you're going to do it, you should do it this way, hitting him in the ribs while he withstands the pressure of that weapon. But Sangdo had to endure it, as despite everything he did, he still clung to the idea of wanting to live. So Pedro put the pin back in the grenade, telling him to get up since he wasn't done yet. Sandio tells him it seems he'll have to use that, and one wonders what he's planning now. In a situation like this, he kneels, pleading with Pedro to let it be a tie. While crying from the embarrassment that the protagonist caused him, Pedro and Yuna look at him as if he seems somewhat pathetic, and suddenly the professor arrives shouting if they are still alive and please hope nothing bad has happened to them. But upon seeing what had happened, he wonders if the Sangdo in front of him is the same one he knows, as they didn't look alike at all. And Sangdo begs him to please save him, and after everything they went through, the case regarding the president's son had finally been resolved. Along with the other kids, Sangdo, still in the situation he was in, kept begging to please be considered a Tai, who, after all, was taken to the headquarters of Glory, and on that same day, his life as an assassin had finally come to an end. The person who had tormented the professor's thoughts for so long had been dealt with, and he wonders how those kids achieved such a feat. While the brothers boasted that their joint attack had worked against Sangdo, Pedro told Yuna to cover herself well, as if not, she could catch a cold, and the professor just kept looking at him, knowing that if he asked what had happened, Pedro wouldn't tell him the truth. And thus, they had finally become complete professionals, but somewhat dissatisfied, because the rank they were assigned was D rank, and Pedro told them to shut up, asking how the hell they got that. As they went down an elevator to the bottom of the underground, where upon arrival, they thought they were going to die. In front of the hot girls ahead of them, haha, they're so ripped. What's up? So they try to get out of there quickly. But a beautiful girl, who had been waiting for them, says now it's time. The brothers wanted to stay longer in that place. The girl asks them to follow her, although she mainly meant Pedro. And while she leads them, she tells them that her president is quite interested in them and that they saved her son and the heir of the Deja group. And of course, he received them with a great banquet to make them comfortable during their stay. Plus, he gifted them luxurious outfits. And I don't know about you, but Yuna doesn't know if she's looking at Pedro or at her own outfit. With eyes that fit them quite well, the brothers feel proud that the president gave them all this thanks to their merits and wonder what else they will receive as that girl opens a large door for them, telling them that the main dish is right in front of them. The brothers are left, blushing at such beauties, and as we see what it was shelves filled with all kinds of high-quality weapons. Since the Deja Group is a military company with the best technology in the world, and the director ordered them to take as many as they wanted, the brothers think they don't need them since they want to be like Pedro the Apostle. But suddenly they had filled all their clothes with all kinds of weapons, saying this would be enough to start. The girl tells them it's better to send them by mail, and Yuna is amazed to see knives that were in that room and wonders if she deserves to be given such expensive things. So she decides to take one. But in the end, she retracts, as she remembers that day she couldn't do anything but watch Pedro handle everything. Just him, he thinks he doesn't deserve it. The other girl asks Pedro if he has chosen which weapon the protagonist would use, and Pedro took a fountain pen, saying that's all he needs. The blushing girl wants to judge him but can't, since she thinks Pedro is attractive, and suddenly the president calls him. The brothers think they will be thanked in person, but the girl tells them she only wants Pedro to go, and the girl tells him that the pen Pedro chose was a valuable choice, and Pedro tells her that it was his favorite model, even though that pen had come out 40 years ago, and as they went down, the conversation became a bit awkward. Come upon arrival, the president asks the girl to leave, and he tells Pedro he was eager to meet him, welcoming him. President of the Deja Group, Choi Yun-shang, he asks Pedro what he thought of the food and the clothes, but Pedro asks why he only wanted to see him, and he tells him it's not for any particular reason, and as the protagonist approaches, he says, well, yes, there is a particular reason, and that he knows who he really is. And well, that's it for the video. Thank you all for watching this video. I covered all the chapters that have come out up to today, so now we have to wait until more come out. And if you're wondering where to read the manga, you can read it on sites like Olympus Scan or Jugen Mangas. By the way, they have really good content, and I read most of them from there too. If you like this type of content, subscribe. I upload videos every week. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to the members of the channel. Well, for now, there's only one, and it's Pelucas8. If you're watching this, I really appreciate you for being my first member, bro. A shout out and a hug, thank you so much, and thanks for supporting this project. Now, with nothing more to say, see you in another video. Bye-bye.